Greetings and welcome to another edition of Montpelier Connection. I'm State Representative Mike Mrowicki from the Wyndham 4 District of Putney and Dummerston. It's post-election now in 2024. We're heading towards the next legislative session. And this is going to be one of those shows where I try and highlight an issue and share some information that I think is particularly important to help the quality of life here. And in this particular case, the quality of life for children and families. Today's guest is Diane Shamas, and she is the coordinator for the Guardian Ad Litem program here in Windham County. Welcome, Diane.
Thanks, Mike.
I wonder if you could share with people what Guardian Ad Litems are and do, and how that works in our court system.
Sure. Guardians Ad Litem are volunteers within the court system. They're appointed within a particular case, and all of their work happens in the context of that case. And for most of our cases, they involve children, and generally children in the abuse and neglect dockets. And a guardian ad litem is appointed to help be another voice and participant in those cases, to help make sure kids understand what's happening, to help the court have a better sense of what's happening with the children, and to advocate inside and outside the courtroom on behalf of that child's best interest.
Yeah. So their focus is just the child.
That's right. There are other parties in the case, for example, the parents, and the parents have attorneys who will advocate for them. And the children in these cases also have attorneys, but the guardian ad litem's role is focused on what's in the child's best interest.
Yeah.
And not necessarily even what a child might want, if what they want, the guardian ad litem thinks is not necessarily in their best interest.
So they try and bring a neutral perspective to this without the other influences.
They certainly they start from a neutral perspective, yes.
Yeah, yeah. So how does one get to be a guardian ad litem, and what kind of people generally tend to go towards this volunteer activity?
Well, to be a guardian ad litem in a particular case, you start by joining the program. And that involves an application and an interview and background checks. And then we provide training so that you understand the legal system that the cases are in and the different roles other people are playing, and you have more background about what's happening with the children and families. And then you would be appointed in a particular case. Volunteers get to choose which cases and how many of them. So some of them might work in 1 or 2 cases, some of them might work in 7, 8, 9, or 10 of them, if they have the time. And so the initial phase of becoming a guardian ad litem really is learning about the program itself and applying to be part of the program.
Sure.
And that can be done online.
Yeah.
And
so the trainings happen online?
The trainings happen, it's a combination of online and in person, and some of that depends on the time of year. Yeah. We've been able to increase our in-person training hours in the last year or so, and our next training will start in January, and that will be a combination of remote and in-person attendance. Yeah. But we also, once someone does the training, then they observe in the courtroom so that it becomes a little bit more familiar, and then they get partnered, and they will work with an experienced guardian ad litem on their first cases until they get the hang of it and they feel confident that they can do it on their own.
Yeah, yeah. Now, what does a case entail? I mean, you get the information about a family, a child. What happens next?
Well, in these cases, and we start all of the volunteers in these cases in what we call the CHINS docket, which is a shorthand for Children in Need of Care and Supervision. A volunteer would get the initial paperwork that's filed in court, and that includes an affidavit, which is an account of what's been going on with this family and why the Department for Children and Families thinks this child is in danger or at risk of serious danger. And so they would start by reading, and then they would attend all of the court hearings They would meet the children outside of the courthouse. Our expectation is that volunteers meet with kids once a month, have some direct contact with them once a month. And they would use their discretion to figure out which other people in that child's life are important, that they should have contact with and speak to. They would also participate in meetings at the Department for Children and Families, possibly at school if there are things going on at school.
Yeah.
So a lot of what they do happens outside the courtroom. Actually, more happens outside the courtroom.
Yeah.
But in the courtroom itself, if the child is there, they'll sit next to them. They will be in contact with the child's attorney and help them stay as current as they can with the case. And there will be opportunities for them to speak about certain issues relative to that child within the hearing context.
Yeah, so the volunteer tries to get to know the child and the situation they're in.
That's the most important starting point, is that they are someone who can get to know the child outside the courtroom.
Yeah.
So a judge is making decisions in these cases and will never have that kind of opportunity to really get to know this family or child, and the volunteer will.
Yeah.
And they can see them in different places and really get a sense of, the different dimensions of that child's life.
And then I should add, one of the reasons you're here is because I am a volunteer guardian ad litem and part of this system that has a lot of eyes on children.
Yes.
And for instance, when there's a monthly team meeting, there could be 8-10 people who are working with this child to make sure that the child's welfare is being seen to, the various school people. What does a meeting like that look like?
Well, those meetings take place in different settings. So that might be at the Department for Children and Families, or it might be school connected. And as you said, there are professionals who are involved with that child in all of those different settings. It might be mental health professionals, medical professionals, social work, educational. And of course, the child's parents would be invited. And after a certain stage, foster parents, if they're involved, would also be invited. And in those settings outside of the courtroom, there's an ongoing conversation to identify what the child needs and how to meet those needs. And so it doesn't have one particular structure, but that's the general idea. And within that, I would say that the guardian ad litem's role is to be another voice to represent the child. Maybe they are actually representing what the child has said. So they can be someone who amplifies the child's voice. They can be someone who encourages a child to speak up for themselves if that child is able to, developmentally is of an age where they can participate. They can ask questions. When I was first becoming a guardian ad litem myself, and I was a volunteer for 10 years before I became the coordinator of the program, the way it was described to me initially was that the guardian ad litem could help play the role of a well-functioning parent. And I think of that. This is a family or a child who's in some kind of crisis, and this is a person who can ask questions, make sure that people do what they say they're going to do, kind of adds that extra attention so that this case doesn't fall into the crack, or people say, make excuses, or whatever it is, that this child gets proper attention and is really seen.
Yeah. Now, usually in a situation like this, there are suggestions or conditions that are required of the parents. And is that part of the guardian ad litem's role to make sure those things are happening, the visitations happen? And
I wouldn't say that it is the guardian's role to make sure that those things happen, but it might be a guardian ad litem who notices whether those things are happening or not, or whether the conditions make sense. So as part of the court process and as part of the Department of Children and Families work, maybe a parent has a visit schedule with kids. with their own children if the children are out of the home, and maybe they almost never show up for those visits. And the not showing up might be really difficult on the kids to get their hopes up and have them disappointed over and over again. And so that might be a concern that the guardian ad litem would raise. Or it could be just the opposite. It could be that the child that has really great contact with the parent, but that guardian ad litem thinks they should have more.
Yeah.
The guardian ad litem might advocate for more. But they are additional eyes on, and they might comment on those things.
Yeah.
But they're not enforcers,
Yeah.
and they're not actually decision makers.
Yeah. So they're part of the process, though. So they would
Yes.
keep notes, and then that gets shared with the caseworkers, with the courts, with the lawyers, everybody.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind when you say that is, for me, is confidentiality.
Yeah.
So all of these cases are highly confidential.
Yeah. Good point.
And the guardian ad litem has to maintain that confidentiality. They have the privilege of knowing this information just for the purpose of assisting the court. And then the information that they get, what can they do with it? They can speak with it to the people who are part of that circle of confidentiality, the people who are part of that case. So they might be talking to the social worker who's in charge of working with this family. They might be providing updates to the attorney who represents the child. They might just be talking to the child about what it is they want and helping them understand what's going on.
Yeah.
Those are all roles that they might play with that information.
Yeah. And for the children, what ages can they be where they would be eligible to have a guardian ad litem?
Well, in Vermont, every child in that docket, in those Chin's cases, is appointed a guardian ad litem.
Okay.
And so they are from birth to age 18.
Yeah.
At age 18, when they're adults, those cases automatically end if they haven't already.
Yeah.
And most of them have.
Yeah.
But so guardians ad litem work with infants and they work with older teens. But as I said, they have some choice over what cases they work on.
Yeah.
So some volunteers prefer babies, and some like teens, and some like the whole range, and they can pick and choose.
Yeah.
And I should say also that in addition to those children, we sometimes need a guardian ad litem for children in the delinquency docket. And those are situations where a child has or is alleged to have done something that would have been criminal if they were adults. But again, we handle that in a confidential manner, and if their parent isn't in a position to help them, maybe because they're a witness or the victim of those acts, then we ask a volunteer to assist and be a guardian ad litem in the delinquency cases.
Okay. And recently, in the last few years, Vermont has tried to change the perspective of children who are charged with crimes. And so what age does that go up to where someone might be eligible?
Well, delinquency cases still go up to age 18 for most things. And we would appoint a guardian ad litem for anyone who's alleged to have done an act that could be delinquent up till age 18.
Okay.
We also have the youthful offender provisions now in which youth even older than 18 are treated in a way that's more like the delinquency docket, because we understand that in fact the brain isn't fully developed at 18, and maybe we should be extending that second chance idea up higher.
So they're not tried in adult court. It's put into the...
In most situations, yes. But in the youthful offender docket, you wouldn't have a guardian ad litem if they're over 18.
Okay. Yeah.
So the only time we might appoint a guardian ad litem for an adult is in situations where the adult is not competent. And that can happen in the criminal docket.
Yeah. So what does that mean, though, not competent?
That means that they are not able to understand the legal proceedings, and they're not able to assist an attorney in their own defense.
Yeah.
And that's a very formal process to decide whether someone isn't competent. But in our system, if someone is not competent, the court will also consider whether or not to order some kind of mental health treatment. And in the process of that decision, we ask a volunteer guardian ad litem to work on behalf of that incompetent criminal defendant.
Yeah.
And then there's another potential scenario where our volunteers also work with adults in either the probate or the mental health docket if they are not competent and a decision is being made and they cannot communicate with the attorney who's working for them. So lots of people who have a mental health diagnosis can communicate with an attorney, but some of them really cannot communicate at all. And those are generally cases where the Vermont Legal Aid Project is involved, and they will ask the court to appoint a guardian ad litem for those adults, and our volunteers will do that as well.
Yeah. What kind of people volunteer for that?
So many different kinds, Mike. People
young,
have
old,
all different kinds of backgrounds. Some of them have legal backgrounds, some of them have mental health or educational or medical or none of the above. Some of them just like children, or they just want to volunteer in the community. There isn't an educational requirement.
Okay. Yeah.
What do we need? We need somebody who is willing to learn about new things, because there is a lot to learn about. Somebody who has flexible time so that they can be available at the court schedule. Somebody who is able to speak up.
Yeah.
You know, somebody who's willing to speak in a courtroom setting or even in a meeting and maybe disagree with the professionals who are involved. And not everybody's up for that.
Computer skills?
Yes, now we need more computer skills because the court doesn't have paper files anymore. So everything, all of the documents come online.
Yeah.
And in fact, many of the hearings now are still being held remotely. And so guardians ad litem have to be able to navigate, to join meetings and to read documents in the database.
Yeah.
But the most important thing is that they be interested where children are involved, in children and families, and want to get to know them better and be able to do that in as non-judgmental a way as possible.
Yeah. What kind of time commitment does this look like for people?
Again, that's really varied because, as I said, some people only take one case at a time and some will take many. Each case in the beginning might be 6 to 8 hours in the first month, and then after that considerably less, unless there's a long contested hearing. And that happens in very few cases, but occasionally there might be a longer hearing and they would need to attend that. Down here in Windham County, we're fairly unique in our guardian ad litem program because many of our volunteers work with a co-guardian on their cases, and that gives them some flexibility about their schedule. If they can't make it, the other person hopefully can, and they collaborate together.
Well, that's a good reminder because I think there are people who have other aspects of their lives and might want to take a vacation or even an extended vacation. So there's allowances for that, right?
Yes, and that's one of the reasons why I've really supported the partnering, because it has meant that people who might not even be here for a couple of months every year can still be active guardians. And some of them just appear remotely from wherever they are. But with a partner, with a co-guardian, they have a lot more flexibility. And I think that's increased their longevity as volunteers. And that's a good thing for the kids they're working with and for the program.
Yeah, and I have found it's incredibly helpful to have another pair of adult eyes to work with and to figure things out and try and check your perspectives as to what the other person is seeing as well.
Absolutely. Because of that confidentiality, you can't go home and talk about it. You can't talk to your friends about it, but you can talk to your co-guardian.
How long do most cases last? Is there
That's
say a
also,
time frame from
there isn't-
2 months to 2 years?
it's more like that, but it could be less than, you said 2 months. I suppose it could be 2 months. Some cases, when they are initially filed, don't make it very far, and the
Yeah.
court says, really, this doesn't belong here.
Yeah.
And so it ends very quickly.
Yeah.
But if the court accepts the initial affidavit as a basis of finding that this child is in need of care and supervision, then cases, I would say, almost always last more than a year, and often 2. And then some cases last considerably longer.
Yeah.
And
They're very complex
they're
cases.
complex. And one of the ways I think about it is that we're asking parents sometimes to make really big changes in their personal life, about how they carry on. And that's hard to do. That's really hard. It's hard to make those changes, especially when substance use is involved. And we are really trying to give parents a meaningful opportunity to get it together, because we believe that sending kids home is the best outcome if it can be done safely. So we're always trying to keep kids at home and to return them home as quickly as possible if we have needed to remove them at all.
Yeah. And I think one of the reasons cases do get longer is because so many of them are associated with substance misuse. And I think the courts want to give parents every chance
We really
to
do.
get things together
Yeah.
and get them. I should say, I mentioned 2 months because I just had a case which basically lasted 2 months, and it was
Yeah.
a very good outcome,
Good.
where there was a youth who had some issues and got it together, and it was done. So sometimes it can be really good outcomes that come faster. Sometimes it takes longer, but it's nice when you see kids have a good outcome.
Absolutely. And sometimes a parent needs longer, but the outcome is good. And, we're hoping that kids will be safe and have their needs met in the process.
Yeah.
And a guardian ad litem helps make sure that happens more reliably.
Sure.
They really, their role is to increase the quality of what the system does.
So specifically, what's the process? Do people contact you if they want to?
They can
get
contact
involved
me
with this?
directly, but we have a link on the Vermont Judiciary website. And so the easiest thing to remember is Vermont Judiciary. And if you go online to Vermont Judiciary and you search for Guardian Ad Litem or GAL, just the initials, then you can learn more about the program and you'll find the application.
Yeah.
And the application can be submitted online. And that's how it starts.
And this is part of the court system.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
In some, every state has a program that's somewhat like ours. It varies how each state does it, but in Vermont, ours is run through the court system.
Yeah.
I'm a court employee, and the training is offered in-house.
Yeah. And actually, we get sworn in.
That's right.
As officers of the court?
That's right. You're an officer of the court, and that is the nature that you're working for the court rather than for a party.
Yeah.
You're not working for either parent, although we come from the belief that helping families stay together is our first goal.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So somebody looks online.
Yes.
Is there an application there?
Yes, there is.
Okay. Yeah.
There's an application there online.
And then the next step is they would be referred to you, or okay.
Yes, if you submit an application online, it goes to our Montpelier office,
Okay.
but then it gets sent to me,
Yeah.
and I call you up, and we set up an interview.
Yeah.
And
that's a face-to-face interview?
it is a face-to-face, and the purpose of it is as much to tell you more about the program and answer your questions as it is for me to learn more about you and really try to get a better sense of whether this is a good fit.
Yeah.
We do background checks. We ask for 3 references.
Yeah.
And then if that all checks out, then you enter one of our training groups, and those start in January, May, and September. And each training is a 4-day series of classes that focuses on different aspects of the program, and then is followed by the observations and the mentoring.
Yeah. And this is, you serve Windham County, so it could be any town in the county, right? And cases can be in any town, so there's travel that could be involved?
Yes, that's true. This is through the Windham Court, so the Windham unit. And there are similar programs in all of the counties around the state.
Yeah.
So if you live somewhere else, you would apply somewhere else. And our kids through the Windham court system can be placed anywhere in Vermont, and sometimes even out of state.
Yeah.
But the majority of them are local.
Yeah.
The one benefit we're able to give our volunteers, in addition to the training, is mileage.
Okay.
So if you're driving as a guardian ad litem, we will reimburse you for that expense.
And that can be really helpful because travel can be cost prohibitive right now. And,
Absolutely.
And that can be a big help.
And if you have a child who's placed far away, we talk about what is a reasonable expectation for contact.
Yeah.
It may not be reasonable for you to drive to the Northeast Kingdom every month and see a kiddo, but maybe you can FaceTime with them, or telephone them, or text. Yeah, depending on the kids, there's a lot of ways now.
Yeah. Even in county, places like Londonderry or Jacksonville are pretty far out there.
Right, and if you live in Londonderry and the child is at the the corner, that can be a lot of distance. Yeah. So we pay mileage to visits and also to the courthouse.
Okay, yeah. So you'll be spending a bunch of time in the court too, right? And
as a volunteer?
As a volunteer.
Yes, although not as much as volunteers used to do.
Okay.
Before COVID, everything was in the courthouse, and typically everything involved a fair amount of waiting in the lobby. And that has really been reduced. Some of our hearings are routinely online. Yeah. If a guardian ad litem can't make a hearing that's supposed to be in person, they can ask for permission to attend online, even in some of those cases. So there is generally a lot less travel to the court than there was.
And those monthly team meetings are usually online too, right?
With the Department for Children and Families, yes, I believe they are.
Yeah. So.
But it's nice to be able to be in phase 2.
It certainly is.
Yeah.
After COVID, I'm somewhat zoomed out, and I much prefer in-person meetings. Okay, so the person will get a call from you, and how long before they could start working on cases?
Well, it depends on how long they have to wait for the next training session.
Okay.
But let's say they train in January, and then I would say in February they would be doing their observations, finishing up the training and doing their observations. And it might be during February or the next month that we would be looking for the first case for them to partner with an experienced guardian ad litem on.
Yeah, and that works really well, I think, to have somebody to work with and kind of ease you into, because some of these cases are complicated, some of them are very difficult.
Yeah.
But it's helpful to keep our eye on the idea that we're trying to help children here.
Absolutely,
and families.
The training, you only take in so much of the training when you're in it.
Yeah.
A lot of it takes on more meaning when you're in your first cases. And so having an experienced guardian ad litem who can help you and answer your questions is really is a good thing. And then I'm the backup and support for everybody.
Yeah.
So whenever a volunteer has questions, as you know, Mike, they call me or they write me and we talk.
Yeah.
And we also have ongoing meetings for guardians ad litem and ongoing trainings. That training that we do initially is all focused on the children in the abuse and neglect docket, but we do additional trainings on all the other dockets as people have time to take it.
Yeah. So a big picture question, what does the landscape look like? Are there more cases now? Are there less cases? Is there a trend that you're seeing?
There are some trends I'm seeing. The first trend I'm seeing is that actually the cases in the abuse and neglect docket are down.
Yeah.
And the Department for Children and Families really had a mandate to try and reduce the number of kids in custody because Vermont was a particularly high custody rate state. And they must be doing that because our cases are down in Windham County. But the cases in the other dockets have increased. And so as I look at my year-to-date statistics, I think this is going to wind up the year slightly busier than the last 3 years. Mm-hmm. But one of the big increases has come in the criminal docket, with a really big increase in the number of defendants who were found incompetent, and the court needs to make this decision about whether or not to order medical treatment.
And that could be someone of any age, right?
Those are people of all age, different offenses. Yeah. Some of those folks have multiple offenses and have come back into the court many times. Yeah. And that's a very much shorter intervention for a volunteer. Those cases don't go on for years. We don't leave the guardians ad litem involved. They're just involved for the purpose of that decision.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your time and thank you for your work. I feel like this is an essential piece of what we do to try and keep kids safe here in Vermont. And so just to go over again, if people want to get in touch with you, they go to the Vermont Judiciary page?
That's the easiest thing, to go to the Vermont Judiciary page and look for GAL.
Okay.
Because that will get you, that's easy to remember.
Yeah.
But people can contact me through the Windham County, the court on Putney Road in Brattleboro.
Okay.
Yes, that's right. And I want to thank you, Mike, because you are one of the volunteers here in Windham we have that have really made a huge difference in many families' lives and many individual lives. And I really appreciate all the time the commitment and the energy that guardians ad litem bring to these cases. I can't say that enough, that this is an area in which volunteering really makes a difference and is very worthwhile.
It is worthwhile and quite rewarding, even as challenging as some of the cases and sometimes painful. It's very rewarding work, and I certainly would encourage anyone who has any inclination to do this to be in touch with Diane and to get involved with this. It's a great way to help kids and families.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree.
So thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
And thank you to BCTV and all the folks out there and the good work that they do to try and to bring the work that's happening in our community out so more people know about it. Until next time, take care. Bye-bye.